may avos Hashem eschem, the various verses in the Tanakh describing God's love to his people. Ve'irastich lila olam, I will betroth you for eternity, and the many statements of the sages. But for the Rebbe, this was a vibrant, living reality, which he found and he saw in every nook and cranny and nuance, in every mitzvah, in every page of the Talmud, in every page of Medrash, in every page of Halacha, in every piece of Rambam, in every piece of Kabbalah and Jewish spirituality. The Rebbe once said something fascinating at a Farbrengen. One of the greatest luminaries in Jewish history was a man known as Rabbeinu Gershom Ma'or HaGoyla. Rabbi Gershom, the light of the exile, the luminary of the exile. He lived in Mainz in Germany in the 10th century and 11th century, and is considered one of the great fathers and patriarchs of Ashkenazic Jewry, of German Jewry, in the early medieval ages. And Rabbeinu Gershom has the special title in Jewish history, Ma'or HaGoyla, the light of the Goyla, the exile. The Rebbe asked, why Rabbeinu Gershom? You had personalities like Rashi, certainly the light of the exile. Rashi is an acronym, Rabbon Shal Yisrael. Rashi remains the Rebbe and the Rebbe of the Jewish people, young and old alike. The 5-year-old child learns with Rashi as his Rebbe, and the 95-year-old great scholar learns with Rashi. Rashi is his Rebbe. You had a personality like the Rambam. You had people like Rav Hai Gaon, Rav Shreira Gaon. You had personalities like the Rashba, like the Ramban, the Ran, the author of Tur, the author of Shulchan Aruch, great luminaries who illuminated the exile. But only one person gets this title, Ma'or HaGoyla. Why? Asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Did Rabbeinu Gershom merit this title? Interesting question. The answer was fascinating. Rabbeinu Gershom instituted many different traditions and customs in the life of Ashkenazic Jewry. Two very famous ones are, he forbade polygamy. Biblically, even though it's not encouraged, but if the woman agrees, if it's with her consent, a person could marry more than one wife. There were always more women than men. So this allowed a woman, in a time when women had, unfortunately, very little security, and women were seen by other cultures and other nations literally as property. And if they weren't taken care of by a father or by a husband, they can die from hunger. So the Torah allowed, if the woman agrees, because you can't marry a woman without her own consent, that she could be married to a man who has a second wife. Rabbeinu Gershom prohibited that. He made a cherem against it, a ban against it for 1,000 years, which, by the way, it was 948, 10th century, and it's continued till 1948. You all know 1940 is the year when Israel was established, but of course the rabbis decided to continue it for another 1,000 years. There's enough stress with marriages between one husband and wife. I don't think anybody needs to bring back polygamy into the Jewish world. So Rabbeinu Gershom made that institution, no polygamy, no two wives. You marry one wife and you work it out and have a happy life together, God willing. He made another takana, another tradition, another famous institution in Jewish life. You cannot divorce your wife without her consent. Biblically, the Torah trusted people and believed they could live up to their most idealistic, greatest divine potential. And sometimes the rabbis and the sages had to insert different limitations, realizing that people are manipulating the biblical system. So the biblical system was that if a man wants to get divorced, he can divorce his wife, even without her consent. Rabbeinu Gershom realized that this is not the way to do it, because the Torah speaks about men who are real men. If a man is a real man, okay. But if men are not real men, if they're not living up to what a man really is and what a husband really is, Rabbeinu Gershom said there's no such a thing. You want to get divorced? We have to hear what your wife has to say. If the wife doesn't agree, you can't just divorce your wife. These are the two famous institutions of Rabbeinu Gershom. Said the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Every law that is established down here on earth is also a law that is established in heaven. The Talmud says and the Midrash says that every mitzvah that Hashem tells us to do, he also does himself. So Rabbeinu Gershom made these two institutions. It wasn't only institutions about men and women down here. It's also a heavenly institution that, so to speak, obliges God himself. Said the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in the 10th century, in the time of Rabbeinu Gershom, Ashkenazic Jewry was suffering already for hundreds of years from the horrific persecution of the church. This was close to 1,000 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. Jews have been in exile for close to a millennium, and Europe was dominated by the Pope, by the church. And they used this against the Jewish people to prove to them that they are not the chosen people anymore because God has rejected them. Look, they showed the Jews, look how downtrodden you are. Look how dejected you are. You are victims. You are at the mercy of the church. And this demoralized the Jewish people. It depleted their energy. It drained them from their enthusiasm and from their passion. And the main argument of the church was, at Sinai, God married you. That's true. God married you, but then he got divorced. He divorced you. You're not chosen people anymore. God didn't like you. He didn't like his spouse. He didn't like how you behaved, especially he didn't like the fact that you rejected the Christian so-called Messiah, whom they called his child. So God now decided you're not anymore his wife. And what did he do? He divorced you. Rabbeinu Gershom said you can divorce your wife without her consent. And if you can divorce your wife without her consent, this is a mitzvah also on God. God cannot divorce the Jewish people without their consent. Ooh. So the Christians said, okay, he didn't divorce you. He just got himself a second wife. You could be the first wife. You know, the wife he's not really interested in. He got himself a second wife. Rabbeinu Gershom says, sorry, God, there's no marrying two women. You married her, this is your wife for eternity. You can't divorce her without her consent. Said the Rebbe, Rabbeinu Gershom was not just a rabbi, a sage, a Talmudic scholar who introduced a new institution into Jewish law. The institutions in Jewish law reflected a metaphysical renewal of the covenant between God and the Jewish people. Rabbeinu Gershom, through these laws, infused the Jewish people with a new spirit, with a new sense of belonging, with a new sense of purpose. Rabbeinu Gershom didn't only institute concrete laws in halacha and Jewish law, but this was symbolic of his contribution to the Jewish world. He taught the Jewish people that the same relationship they had with Hashem at Sinai remains intact, the same love and the same connection and the same intimacy and the same powerful bond between God and every single Jew remains untarnished, unscathed, indestructible. The relationship is eternal and timeless, and no sin and no exile and no persecution can cancel it and decimate it and destroy it. The relationship is as powerful as ever. The Hafti Eschem Amar Hashem, I love you, God says, which was said by the last prophet Malachi. Afterwards, there's no prophecy anymore. Soivzman Anavua. Esther Soivzman Anavua. Malachi is the last prophet of the 24 books of Tanakh. And in that last prophecy, God tells the Jews, I love you. And Hafti Eschem Amar Hashem, V'oyev es Yaakov. Rabbeinu Gershom taught the Jewish people, this will never, ever cease. That's why he's called Ma'or HaGoyla, the light of the exile, because he infused the Jewish people with a new light and a new enthusiasm. And I think to myself that in many ways, after the Holocaust, the greatest black hole in human history and in Jewish history, Jews asked themselves justifiably the question, does God still love us? Do we have a real future? Can we really look ourselves in the mirror and say, we are the Am Hashem, we are that nation that God chose? You have chosen us. You have loved us. You have elevated us. You wanted us to change the world. Is this really true? After Auschwitz and Dachau, Treblinka and Bergen-Belsen, existentially and psychologically, when Jews faced the torment, the agony, the turmoil, the suffering, and the sheer amount of pain and death that each of them observed, including the Lubavitcher Rebbe with members of his own family. His brother was shot, his grandmother was shot, uncles, aunts, relatives, sister-in-law, brother-in-law murdered by the Germans. Besides this terrible suffering of his own family, himself, and his father, especially under Stalin, the communists in the cursed Soviet Union, his father himself was arrested and tortured and sent to Kazakhstan, where he died in exile in Kazakhstan in Almaty in 1944, middle of the war. The Rebbe himself endured what that whole generation endured, or so many of that generation endured. And Jews asked themselves the question, is there a real future? Is there real hope? Can we really be positive? Can we really believe in this type of love? I mean, come on. History is telling us something else. Let's remember that the suffering that the Jewish people experienced in the last century, the 20th century, is mind-staggering. Before the Second World War, I mean, on the Tsarist Russia, and then the First World War, and then the Civil War, the Bolshevik Revolution. And that's just in Eastern Europe where the Rebbe lived. The Rebbe was born in Ukraine in 1902, and other parts of the world. Both on a spiritual level, mass assimilation, and on a physical level, the suffering and the persecution before the Holocaust. What Stalin and Lenin and Trotsky and the Soviet communist Rishoyim did for the Jews in Russia and for so many other millions of people. And then came Hitler. And the Rebbe was living in Germany when Hitler came to power. 1933, January, Adolf Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, was elected as the Chancellor of Germany. That's when the Rebbe left Germany and he relocated to Paris until 1941 when the Germans invaded Paris, France, and the Rebbe escaped and ultimately made it to Lisbon. And he got the boat to the United States of America. He came here in June 1941. Observing this bloodshed, the rivers of Jewish blood flowing through Europe. Literally I remember I visited Poland a few years ago with a huge group of students from different campuses in the United States of America. And at some point I showed them, I said, every inch of soil here is saturated with Jewish blood and Jewish sweat and Jewish tears. And the question that Jews asked consciously and subconsciously, with a voice that was heard and an inner voice, what the Zohar calls kala pneima delay shtama, is, are we still that same people? Are we the people who God loves, who God entrusted with a mission to change the world and bring the world to redemption, to Mashiach? Are we the same people? And I think this was one of the great contributions of the Rebbe. He was a ma'or hagoyla, perpetuating and teaching that message of Rabbeinu Gershom in a post-Holocaust era. If Ben Gurion and Chaim Weizmann and other Zionists went to rebuild the Jewish state, we just heard a few minutes ago from Benjamin Netanyahu and President Rivlin, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was determined to rebuild the Jewish soul, Jewish consciousness, Jewish pride, Jewish dignity. The Rebbe wanted to inculcate in the heart of every Jewish child, gut zu sein a Yid, geschmack zu sein a Yid. To be a Jew is a privilege. The words Ashreinu matov chelkeinu, Uma noyim goyraleinu, Uma yafa yerushasenu, for the Rebbe became marching orders of the Jewish people. You can celebrate Jewish life. No, the Jewish mission has not ceased. The Jewish purpose has not been obliterated. Yes, we have endured unfathomable pain. We may never understand the mystery, why, the magnitude of it is beyond human comprehension. As he would say, how can a finite brain even think it can appreciate an infinite God? Yes, the tragedies have created deep uncertainty and existential pain and suffering for so many, and for so many years the Rebbe served as a father figure and a mother figure for so many survivors, both of Hitler's Holocaust and of Stalin's Holocaust in the Soviet Union. Jews of all ages and demographics, religious and secular and right-wing and left-wing, would come, and they found in him the empathy and the love and the affection. I've heard this from many survivors over the years. Together with all of that, the Rebbe inculcated in the hearts of every single one of his students and disciples and admirers and any Jew he came into contact, the enthusiasm, the inspiration, and the conviction that God loves you infinitely and God empowers you infinitely, and that our future is bright and hopeful, and that the mission that God has given us at Sinai to transform the landscape of planet Earth, and that each of us must become an ambassador of love and light and hope and healing and authenticity and wisdom and redemption, not only is still intact, but it grows and increases from day to day. This was the optimism and the joy and the simcha sachayim, the joy of life, the Rebbe brought into the Jewish world through his singing and through his smile, through his dancing and through his teachings, through his talks and through his celebration, through his thousands and thousands of letters and addresses, his relationship and contacts with people individually and collectively. It's one of the great themes that pervades all of his sichos, all of his talks. You come out from his talks and you feel proud to be a Jew. You sense the love in every story of Chumash, in every mitzvah, and even the negative stories, even the stories that seem so bleak and pessimistic. Somehow the Rebbe, in his own inimitable genius, managed to excavate the inner love and positivity that lay there. And as we continue, I want to take a break and sing one of the songs that the Rebbe really loved and cherished and brought out so much. This attitude, this emotion. Reb Menachem Feldman, Sydney, can you give us B'cha Hashem Chasisi Ale Voisha La'olam, which means, in you, God, I find refuge. I will never be humiliated and ashamed.
Menachem Feldman, B'cha
Hashem Chasisi Ale Voisha La'olam.
Menachem, go for B'cha Hashem.
If he doesn't sing, I'm going to have to sing.
F minor.
I'll sing. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Reb Menachem. I'll share with you a story, beautiful story. Elie Wiesel, Professor Eli Wiesel, many of you have heard him. He's been to Argentina. He was the very well-known Holocaust survivor who was also the recipient of the Nobel Prize for Peace in 1985, I believe. And Elie Wiesel came from Siget, Hungary. His family came from Vizhnitzer Hasidim. And in the Holocaust, he lost his father. He lost his mother. He lost some of his siblings. He was in Auschwitz. He was in Buchenwald. And he emerged a lone survivor. Very few of his family survived. He became a journalist. He became a writer. He became a lecturer. He was a personal friend of my father, my late father, because they both worked in journalism. And they were very close. For many years, they had a very close relationship. And my father shared with me what he heard from Elie Wiesel, that Wiesel did not want to get married. He felt that it was inappropriate for himself to marry. How can he marry and bring children to the world? He said when he saw what the world did to so many Jewish children, he had this famous expression in Yiddish, a book, und die Welt hat geschwiegen, and the world was silent. Later it became the book Night in English, but in Yiddish the title was, and the world was silent. 1.5 million children sent to gas chambers. He felt it was unjust, it was immoral for him to bring new Jewish children into the world. If this is what the world is capable of, why would he subject a new generation of Jews to unthinkable horrors and dread and terror? And he really didn't want to get married. And you know who convinced him to get married? The Rebbe. The Rebbe had long conversations with Elie Wiesel, late hours till the wee hours in the morning. As far as I know, I think one of the longest letters the Rebbe ever wrote was to Elie Wiesel in 1965, trying to convince him to get married. I think it's a 7-page letter. The Rebbe did not write such long letters. 2 pages, 3 pages was considered a long letter, but this is a 7-page letter convincing Professor Eli Wiesel to get married. And you know what happened? He got married. In 1971, he married his wife, Marion, and a year later, he became the father, the proud father of a young Jewish boy who he named Elisha after his own father who perished in the Holocaust. And I know this because Elie Wiesel once told me, he says, my son and you were born not far apart in 1972. And I came to your bris and your father came to my son's bris. And the Rebbe sent him a beautiful bouquet of flowers for his son's bris, and I believe also a beautiful bouquet of flowers for his wedding. Once Elie Wiesel shared, he was sitting with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him what he would like. The Rebbe offered to give Wiesel a gift. He said, I want to give you something. What would you like? And Elie Wiesel turned to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he asked for something very, very unique. He said, Lubavitcher Rebbe, can you teach me how to cry again? And those of you who are children of Holocaust survivors or grandchildren or friends of survivors or maybe survivors yourself know how profound that request is, because so many survivors face so much trauma and pain. They could not cry any longer. As a Jew once told me, he said, we knew that if we would start crying, we would never stop. So we shut off the faucet of tears. But the problem is, to shut off one faucet, you have to shut off all the faucets. And sometimes all emotions get affected. But the pain was so deep. Many of them could not cry anymore. The wellspring, the fountain of tears just dried up. So Eli Wiesel asks the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he says, teach me how to cry again. And the Rebbe, with the profoundest compassion and his angelic, beautiful, loving blue eyes, gazed at the painful eyes of Eli Wiesel, who was seeing the worst of humanity. And he looked at him and he said, Rebbe Eliezer, I would love to teach you how to cry, but that's not enough. I'm going to teach you how to laugh. I want to teach you how to sing. And I want to teach you how to dance. And this, my friends, the Rebbe did. He taught Eli Wiesel to cry. He taught Professor Wiesel to sing. I heard him sing quite a few times. And he even taught him to dance. And not just to Eli Wiesel. The Rebbe taught a generation of broken and downtrodden Jews how to cry, how to feel pain, how to sing, and most importantly, how to dance. Growing up in the shadow of the Rebbe, I always marveled how he could cry. Here's a man in his 70s, in his 80s, in his early 90s, sitting in front of thousands of people, and he can just burst out sobbing. I still remember one Simchas Torah, the Rebbe spoke about Moshe breaking the luchas, the tablets, because of his love to the Jewish people. And the Rebbe broke out in tears. He was crying for close to a half an hour, but not just crying, sobbing, no self-consciousness, no consideration like where I am and who's looking. The Rebbe just wept, and he wept and wept. And then the Rebbe would sing. We grew up the Rebbe singing, the Rebbe dancing. The Rebbe didn't only dance. When he danced, you felt that all of earth was being uplifted in the Rebbe's dance. Heaven was coming down to earth, and earth was coming up to heaven. When I watched the Rebbe dance for hours, I felt that his dancing was one that empowered not only himself, but empowered every Jew that was present in the room to be able to celebrate life, to be able to look at life from the lenses of infinite love, to be able to see yourself not as a victim in a long, tragic Greek mythical story, but to see yourself as an indispensable note in God's cosmic symphony, as somebody who's aligned with infinity, somebody who has the power to take a world of tragedy and infuse it with meaning and purpose and joy and love and affection. This the Rebbe tried to do with every person he came in contact to, in every one of his speeches and sermons and presentations and teachings, both writing and verbally. And it was not because the Rebbe was oblivious to tragedy or pain. His own life was not an easy life, to put it mildly. But the Rebbe truly believed that good will triumph over evil, joy can triumph over sadness, confidence can triumph over insecurity, love can triumph over hate, resilience can triumph over abuse, that if the world was conceived in love by a loving God, ultimately, as he would often say, the powers of good are eternal and the powers of evil are transient, superficial, and temporary, because their entire purpose is simply to help us flex our muscles and challenge us to be able to vanquish the negativity and the toxicity inside of us and around us. That philosophy and perspective is not always easy to internalize. But the Rebbe was adamant that this is how the Jewish people can live and ought to live. When you faced a crisis in life, an obstacle in life, he always taught every obstacle is a challenge and every challenge is an opportunity. an opportunity for deeper awareness, an opportunity for deeper growth, an opportunity to maximize your ultimate potentials. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean you invite a challenge into your life. Of course not. But what it does mean is look at life from a positive perspective. Look at yourself from a positive perspective. In every encounter and experience, you have to be able to see the love, even if it is so concealed and disguised by layers of negativity and mistrust. In 1986, there was a young man who was suffering from homosexual tendencies. And in desperation and agony, he wrote a letter to the Rebbe. What he should do. And the Rebbe wrote him back a 3-page letter. I have a copy of the letter. I got it years later. The Rebbe then spoke about it that year on Purim. I didn't know then about the letter. I was there when the Rebbe spoke about it. But years later, I obtained a copy of the Rebbe's letter to this young man. It's a beautiful, beautiful letter. First of all, there's no judgmentalism. It's full of empathy, full of love, full of understanding. The Rebbe was probably one of the least judgmental people you could have encountered. Not because he didn't have convictions. Oh, did he have conviction? The Rebbe's fear of God, his Yireh Shamayim, his commitment to Torah was limitless. I can't even describe it in words. But because he was so fearful of God, in a good way, because he was so in love with God, therefore, he didn't have to be judgmental. Because he saw the godliness in people. And he saw the beauty in people. And he always tried to accentuate it in people. So with the Rebbe, you felt comfortable to say everything. I was always astounded by the fact. You know how it is. You come to a big rabbi, a big sage, there's certain things you don't talk about. You don't want to embarrass yourself, right? People like to talk about nice things. But with the Rebbe, I felt people didn't have this issue. You could go into the Rebbe, people would go on 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and share everything. Nothing they wouldn't share. Why not? So I once heard from Shlomo Kalbach. Remember the composer Shlomo Kalbach? And he said, because when people came to the Rebbe, they felt that he knows it already. He knows it. What are you going to hide? He knows everything. You could spill the beans. It was an interesting observation from Reb Shlomo. But I think there was also something more to that than that. When you spoke to the Rebbe, you felt that nothing that you would tell him would diminish his love towards you and his respect for you. There was nothing you can tell him that would shock him to the point where he would say, get out of my home. And he would start looking at you with disdain, with a negative attitude. We're afraid to open up to people because how are you going to look at me? You're going to judge me. It's so hard to be vulnerable and to remove all my clothes and to really lay my soul bare. But what happens if I know that in your presence, I can think out loud and I can be as authentic as my truth is, because nothing I say will compromise and diminish and tarnish your absolute loyalty to me, love towards me, and dedication to me. Then I could say everything. That's how people felt with the Rebbe. He was very non-judgmental, even if he would disagree, and even if he would share with you in very emphatic terms what his opinion is and what his view is. And I saw this in this letter in 1986 to this boy. The boy asked the Rebbe, why would God do this to me? Why do I have to deal with these types of deviant tendencies and desire for an alternative lifestyle, relationships which are forbidden, which are considered immoral in the Torah? And of course, the Rebbe assures him that our struggle is not sin. The physical relationship is wrong, but the struggle that a person has is not his or her choice. You never blame a person for their struggles, and you never judge a person for their struggles. On the contrary, you have to display extraordinary empathy. But then the Rebbe addresses one point. It startled me, and it still inspires me today, years after I've seen the letter, because for me it was a paradigm. It really, it helped shape my worldview of how to communicate to people. because I have now the privilege, pre-corona, to travel to communities all over the world. I had the privilege of traveling to hundreds of communities over 2 decades, including Buenos Aires and other parts of Argentina and South America, communicating to crowds. And this one line, one paragraph, affected me very profoundly. And I'll tell you what the Rebbe said. I'm paraphrasing it and explaining it in my words the way I understood it. I'm not repeating the letter verbatim. The boy says, why do I have to deal with this? The Rebbe says, I don't know. Nobody knows the reason for challenges that God gives a person. Why does your soul have to endure these challenges? Nobody knows. He says, I also don't know. But then the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, I want to add one point, and it may apply to your life. He doesn't say it with certainty, but he says this may apply to your life. And here's what the Rebbe shared with a young man struggling with something very real and very profound. This is back in 86. This is not 2020. This is in 86. The Rebbe says as follows. Sometimes a person has the power to change the world. A person has the power to have a tremendous impact on society and become a source of extraordinary blessings. But that power is very deep, and it's embedded in the subcellars of their psyche, and they don't have access to it. They don't even know about it. They're not cognizant of it. And we know that life is one where God wants our creativity. We are partners with God in the work of repairing the world. We don't get free lunch. This is called avodah. Hashem wants us to flex our muscles, to maximize our potentials, to work hard, to discover who we are, and to become the authors of our own biography, and to make the choices that will define our destiny. That's why there is free choice. I have to fight for my truth, for my light, for my inner diamonds. But the challenge here is that this person who has the power to change the world does not know of his or her inner treasures. They're not cognizant of it. And it may remain dormant forever. So what does God do? God sometimes provides this person with a very serious challenge. And this challenge challenges the person to excavate their deepest potentiality. This challenge stimulates the person to go much deeper into themselves, because there's no way they can overcome this challenge if they do not dig deeper and deeper and yet deeper. There is no way they can afford to live a superficial life, to operate on a level of consciousness which is external. These challenges compel and stimulate and trigger the person to be able to go much, much deeper into themselves. And in that process, they discover their true infinite light, and they change the world. That may be one of the reasons why God sometimes gives a person a challenge. I am reading this letter, and I think to myself, friends, wow. You know, from my visit to many communities, I deal with this issue quite often. Today, it's a very hot issue: gender identity, alternative lifestyles. Last night, we had a session with the Montreal community. Some of you probably watched it. Myself, a famous journalist there, Rabbi Manis Friedman. This was a huge question: gender identity. And there's generally two different approaches. One approach is empathy, compassion. Just feel bad for what the person is going through. Another approach is embrace it, celebrate it. If this is what you feel, this is who you are, this is how you should live. Two approaches, very different approaches. So we know the approach that says just follow your instincts. If these are your impulses, do it. That's not what the Torah says. God says the struggle is not a sin, but this type of relationship is immoral. So there's the other approach. The other approach is I can just feel bad. I have compassion. I have empathy. There's a tragedy, And let's face it, this is a Nebuch. This is a Nebuch situation. How do you say Nebuch in Spanish? It's unfortunate. English, unfortunate. And here comes the Rebbe's approach, a third approach. The Rebbe looks at this boy, and not only does he not feel that this person is a Nebuch case who was given this crazy, insane challenge that now he has to live with for the rest of his life. The Rebbe sees the infinite light that is buried beneath the challenge. The Rebbe doesn't look at this person's challenge as some horrible situation that turns you into a victim and I feel bad for you. No. Where other people may look at you as a victim, the Rebbe says, you were given an incredible mission in this world. You have powers and resources that you yourself don't imagine. And this is your path to greatness. By confronting this challenge, by subduing it, by transcending it, by transforming it, by dealing with it, you will discover your ultimate greatness. Wow. He took what is so dark and transformed it into light. That approach pervaded all of his teachings and all of his encounters and all of his correspondence. It's one that inspires me to this very day, how to look at a person, how to look at myself, how to look at my loved ones. We never ask for challenges, but when we encounter them, we must never see ourselves or others as unfortunate victims, but rather these very challenges constitute our portal, our vista to our own infinity, to our own depth. We have to have the courage to be able to look at the klipa, to look at the shell, the husk in its eyes, and say, I will not get deterred from you. I will not be afraid by you. I know you make believe you're a bully and you're trying to destroy my life, but I know the truth. If it came from God, there is love that's hidden there. And even if I didn't ask for it, I am going to confront you and I will not let go of you until I do not come out more blessed from this encounter. And with that, the Rebbe tried to teach a generation how to take darkness and transform it into light, how to take moments of difficulty and pain and turn them into springboards and catalysts for unprecedented growth, for rebirth, for rejuvenation, rejuvenation as in J-E-W. My dearest friends, Tayere Yidden, we're going to conclude with this teaching that I heard from the Rebbe once. It was the night before Shavuos in the 1980s. I have to tell you the truth, the Rebbe said this maybe in 10 or 15 seconds. It was very easy to miss because the Rebbe would often, in his addresses, they were very intricate and he could make a reference to something very swiftly and he made a point very fast, and if you missed it, you missed it, but you may have missed an incredible gem. And this was one of those examples. The Rebbe said, Shavuos is coming tomorrow night. A lot of guests have arrived. And we all have a mitzvah of achnasas orchim, to be hospitable to our guests. As Shammai says in the Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 1, have a mekabel es kol ha'adam b'sever panam yafas. Shammai says, welcome every person with a pleasant countenance, with warmth, with passion, with love. So we must make sure that every guest is welcomed and he or she has a place to stay, and we offer them hospitality and take care of, provide them with their physical needs and emotional needs, and those who need help for the holidays, financial help, everybody should help them. And then the Rebbe said, but here's a question. Shammai said, greet everybody with a positive and affectionate and a warm countenance, but he behaved in an opposite way. The Talmud says in Shabbos, page 31, Lamed Aleph, that a convert, a potential convert, a non-Jew came to Shammai And he said, Shammai, please teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one leg. He wants to learn the whole Torah standing on one leg. How long could you stand for on one leg? 30 seconds, 50 seconds. If you're very athletic and you have good balance, 2 minutes. Teach me the whole Judaism standing on one leg. Teach me all of Judaism in 45 seconds. It's embarrassing. Imagine I come to a grand physicist and I say, teach me all of physics in 2 minutes. Teach me all of mathematics. Teach me all of biology and cosmology in 2 minutes. It's embarrassing. Judaism, literature spans over thousands of years. You want to learn the whole Torah standing on one leg? What does Shammai do? Dochafoy ba'amas abinyan, the Talmud says. Shammai had a stick, a contractor stick that was used for measuring properties, estates, measurements of the ground. So Shammai had that stick, amas abinyan, a stick that was used for construction purposes, for real estate. Shammai took the stick, dochafoy, he pushed him away, threw him out. Came to Hillel. Teach me the whole Torah standing on one leg. Hillel says, no problem. How long do you have? 10 seconds? 10 seconds? I'll teach you 10 seconds. What you dislike to be done to you, don't do to anybody else. That's the whole Torah. What you don't want to be done to you, don't do to anybody else. Treat other people like you would like to be treated. That's the whole Torah. The idach pirushu zil gemara. The rest of the Torah is a commentary on this. Now go study the commentary. The whole Torah is a commentary on this statement. Go study the commentary. You could spend 90 years studying the commentary. You could spend 900 years studying the commentary. But you got the whole Torah in 10 seconds. Asks the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Shammai says in Pirkei Avot, greet everybody with a pleasant countenance. Why didn't he do the same? He could have told the Gentile, come back another day. You're not ready for it. You can't learn the whole Torah on one leg. Why does he take a stick and throw him out, pushes him away? And even if it doesn't mean that he physically threw him out, but verbally he said, get out of here, leave. That's not called having mekabelis kol ha'adam. Greet every person, Jew and non-Jew, pleasantly. This was the Rebbe's question. Interesting question. Seems so hypocritical. You know, what do they say? Do as I say and not as I do. The sages didn't believe in that. Do as I say and do as I do. A rabbi can't be hypocritical. When you're a spiritual leader, you got to live up to what you teach your students and your children. I once called somebody in the house and I said, can I please speak to your father? So the child comes back a few seconds later, and he says, he was a little boy, my father told me to tell you that he's not home. Yeah, I said, tell your father I love him. You don't do that. You have to teach your children to speak truth. How do you teach your children to speak truth? When you speak truth. How could Shammai teach one thing and do the opposite? Great question. And the Rebbe said, now is not the time to elaborate on this. But then, literally, for a few seconds, he threw out a nugget, an idea, and he moved on. And when I heard that nugget, I'm like, wow. I'll tell you what the Rebbe said. I'm going to elaborate the way I understood it because I want you to appreciate what he said. The Rebbe said, no, Shammai was not throwing a person away. Shammai was not rejecting a person. Shammai was not telling him, get out of my yeshiva, get out of my synagogue. No. We don't do that in Chabad, right? Rabbi Grumbla, we don't do that in Chabad. Shammai didn't do that. The Rebbe said, Judaism has two foundations, Anoichi and Lo Yiyelecha. Talmud says that the first two commandments, the Jews heard directly from God. Anoichi v'lo yiyelecha mipi agvura shemanu. Directly from God, they heard the first two commandments. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am your God who took you out of Egypt. And Lo yiyelecha elokim acherim, you shouldn't have any other gods. Why those two? So the Tanya says in chapter 20, the first commandment is the source for all of the positive mitzvahs. And the second commandment is the source for all the negative mitzvahs. The first commandment, I am your God who has taken you out of Egypt, is the source for all the positive commandments, which are all based on the fact that there's God, and he created the world with a purpose, and he gave us a blueprint of how to live in order to maximize our potentials and bring the world to its real divine purpose. And then God says, and there's certain things I don't want you to do. I don't want you to violate Shabbos, and I don't want you to eat non-kosher food, and I want you to lend money to a Jew on interest. I don't want you to eat on Yom Kippur. I don't want you to lie. I don't want you to steal. I don't want you to have adultery, etc. That's all rooted in the fact, don't substitute me for another God. All the negative commandments are traced back, are all rooted in that commandment. There's no other God. Don't turn alcohol into your God. Don't turn money into your God. Don't turn your ego into your God. Don't turn insecurity into your God. Don't turn arrogance into your God. Don't turn anything, and don't replace the real God for fake gods. That is the source of all of the mitzvahs that we have to stay away from, those things that God tells us to abstain. And the Rebbe said Judaism has both pillars. They're both the pillars of Judaism, because you can't have one without the other. There is no yes without a no. Imagine somebody gets married to his wife and he says, yes, but the husband of the wife says, but it's not exclusive. She says, sometimes I want to have somebody else. Or he says, sometimes I want to have somebody else. It's not going to work. Every yes must include a no. A person says, I want to lose weight, so I'm going to start going to the gym an hour a day and work out. And then I'm going to come home or go to the bar mitzvah and I'll eat all the pizza and all the cheesecake. It's not going to work. You have to decide what type of lifestyle you want to live. Every yes includes a no. Hareyat mikudeshesli, says Tosfos, ashrala kula alma kehektish. You can't be betrothed to somebody. I can't belong to you in a unique, exclusive way if I don't have the courage to be able to create boundaries. There's red lines that I don't cross. Judaism that is yes without no is not real. It doesn't last. You need the yes and you need the no. The chesed and the gvura, the positive, what I do and what I don't do. That's the only type of relationship that is real. So the Rebbe said, Shammai was teaching him the first foundation of Judaism, and Hillel was teaching him the second foundation of Judaism. When Shammai was dachafay ba'amas habinyan, when he pushed him out with a stick, Shammai was not being negative and disrespectful and cruel. God forbid, no. Shammai said, you want to know the whole Torah when you're standing on one leg? I'll give it to you. Let me tell you the first foundation of Torah. The first foundation of Torah is that you have to have the courage to push away certain things from your life. You have to have the courage and the commitment to say, this is not for me. Sometimes thoughts come into your head, instincts come into your heart, cravings and addictions come into your soul, and you have to take a stick and you have to say, sorry, this is not for me. I cannot allow you to control the steering wheel of my life. It's a thought, it's a feeling, it's a craving, but I have to take my stick of morality, the stick that builds the world, Amas Habinyan, and say no. Now you're ready for Hillel's teaching, and Hillel will teach you the positive. Treat every person with love and with respect. Here the Rebbe took a teaching of the Talmud. In many ways, it seems like Shammai was this harsh, negative person. And he revealed a deeper layer and a deeper dimension. And it's true in each of our lives. Our homes must have both forces. Love is critical. Love and connection and the relationship. But for love to be real and viable, it must be based on discipline and structures and boundaries, not because we don't like the person, but because we really love the person. Boundaries and discipline must always be an extension of love. The moment discipline is not connected with love, it's not good. But when discipline comes from love, then it becomes sacred, it becomes holy, it becomes important. Because discipline means there's consequences. It means you're valuable. It means you make choices. It means I really care about you. It means I expect from you great things because you have so much potential. Discipline must always come from love. Shammai and Hillel work together. Anoichi v'lo yelecha, mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs lo sasa. My dearest, dearest friends, on this great night, I bless you and I bless all of us and all of the Jewish people and the whole community, the beautiful community of Argentina, that we should be able to internalize this perspective, this passion, this love, this commitment, this enthusiasm, and to be able to continue to saturate our homes, our lives, our communities with this conviction that we are all ambassadors of infinity into the world, and we all have the power to be able to bring in so much positivity, to know our mission. There's nothing in life like knowing your mission and knowing that you can succeed in your mission, individually and collectively, to bring our world closer to redemption. Thank you very, very much. Want to do another niggin? Reb Menachem, Yifrach B'Yom of Tzaddik.
Yifrach B'Yom. Poner música, música.
Ready? Go. Yifrach b'yom of tzadik, v'rasholem atziyoreya. Yifrach b'yom of tzadik, v'rasholem atziyoreya. V'yeheyom adiyom, v'nohor adam ve'odeh, v'nohor yisrael.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Jacobson.
Zach, thank you. My love and blessings to all of you.
Beautiful words, inspiring words, hermosas palabras, inspiradoras.
Thank you.
Muchísimo contenido. Queremos agradecer también a Rabino Nathan Grumblat por la perfecta traducción, como siempre, Baruch Hashem. Queremos agradecer a la Dirección y Departamento de Medios de Horta Argentina, Martín Schnuck y Pablo Levi por la producción de los videos. También a Gustavo Peñafiel de la firma Nancilota, Yamila Bresovsky, diseño, al Departamento de Tzach, por supuesto, liderada por Rabino Levi Silverstein y su esposa y todo el equipo. También el Departamento de Medios de Chabad, Argentina. Este evento fue auspiciado Leilun Ishmat Eli Ben Yehuda Cohen, Zichrono Libraja, Mordechai Ben Moshe, Zichrono Libraja, Yosef El Hanan Ben Yitzchok Roisen, Zichrono Libraja, Chaim Ben Betzalel Shlomovich, Zichrono Libraja. Por supuesto, agradecemos a todos los shluchim y a los Batei Jabad y las instituciones de Jabad por la difusión, la participación, y esto realmente muestra cómo somos uno, como el rebe nos educó, como el rebe nos enseñó, Barheinu, Abinu, Kulanu, Keehad, cuando hay unión, cuando estamos todos inspirados al mismo objetivo, con la misma fuerza, seguro tenemos la bendición. Y por supuesto agradecemos a cada uno de ustedes que está presente y especialmente a los que se quedaron hasta estas altas horas de la noche inspirándonos y deleitándonos. Por supuesto, como dijimos antes, la parte más importante es la conexión con el rebe, por eso le volvemos a recordar, entrar a la página tributoalrebe.com. Ahí pueden escribir su nombre en hebreo y el nombre de vuestras madres y de todo aquel que quieran pedir bendición. Esto va a ser llevado personalmente al Oel del Rebe durante este día, así que es una oportunidad y una fuente muy grande de bendición. Y por supuesto, como el Rebe nos enseñó, llevar las cosas a la práctica, no solamente quedarnos con la inspiración, con los buenos pensamientos y las buenas intenciones. Así que tomemos las decisiones. Y si ustedes se anotan en la página de tributoalrebe.com las decisiones que tomaron, eso los inscribe a un sorteo de $1 del Rebe. Igual como dije antes, todos estamos recibiendo el $1 del Rebe, porque nos estamos conectando con el Rebe y haciendo su voluntad y dándole najes, pero uno se va a llevar, el sorteo, el Goral va a decidir, es el que va a llevarse físicamente el $1 del Rebe. Agradecemos nuevamente a la señora Rica Forma por esta noble donación y participación en darnos la oportunidad de recibir $1 del Rebe. Hay 3 opciones para elegir, por supuesto todo lo bueno es positivo. La primera opción, van a recibir, inscribiéndose, un librillo con los estudios específicamente para mañana, como el Rebe quería, el Rebe nos enseñó. La segunda opción es también recibir la sijot, una sijá del Rebe, una locución o un pensamiento del Rebe semanal, o anotarse al proyecto Likutei Sijot de todas las semanas para ir terminando así a través de los meses los diferentes tomos del Likutei Sijot. Y por supuesto la tercera opción es Mifzoim, no solamente hacer, sino inspirar a otros Yehudim, inspirar, como el Rebe nos enseñó, a que otros hagan, encender luminarias, especialmente lo que es tefilín, velas de Shabbat, tzedaká, educación judía, libros judíos, una casa kasher, mezuzot, que estén kasher las mezuzot, tener mezuzot, y todo lo que el Rebe nos enseñó, están todas las opciones. Pueden anotarse ahora, tributoalrebe.com. Agradecemos nuevamente a todos los participantes y ahora vamos a ver unas promos explicando el proyecto de Shiurim, que es el estudio diario, y también el proyecto Likutei Sijot. Quédense y después pueden retirarse. Les volvemos a agradecer. Muy buenas noches a todos y que tengamos las bendiciones
deportista,
del Rebe.
antes de jugar un partido, tiene que precalentar. Nosotros también, antes de salir a trabajar, antes de hacer nuestras tareas mundanas, tenemos que precalentar, pero nuestra mente, nuestra cabeza, y la mejor forma de hacerlo es con Shiurim.
Gimel Tammuz es un día de Iskashus. Todo José cuando llega este día está pensando cómo puedo endurecer y fortalecer mi conexión con el Rebe. La mejor forma es el estudio.
Shiurim nació como una revista que esperamos ansiosamente todas las semanas en la Keilah, por sus enseñanzas, por su practicidad, por su comodidad y por su profundidad.
El que no hace hitas, empiece a hacer hitas y Besat Hashem llegar a estudiarlo. Ahora con Shiurim es mucho más fácil, tanto con la aplicación o con la revista física.
Shiurim me da la posibilidad de estudiar Torah todos los días en el lugar donde esté. Me ayuda a organizar mis tiempos y me conecta con el Rebe.
Qué mejor que reforzar nuestro vínculo con el Rebe. Es lo que el Rebe quiere para nosotros, estudiar todos los días. Necesitas aire para vivir, necesitas toire para vivir.
Para poder salir a la cancha de la mejor forma. Así que no puede faltar en cada Yehudí, desde este Gimel Tammuz, la aplicación Shiurim.
Tiene todo lo que un Josid quiere tener. Explicación en el Rambam, Tania, el Ayom Yom, sabiduría diaria, Sijot del Rebe. Súper recomendable, es lo más.
Todo a nuestro alcance.
Únete.
Te presentamos el proyecto Likutei Sijot, un estudio sistemático de los profundos análisis de la Torá y enseñanzas del rebe de Lubavitch. ¿De qué se trata? Es muy simple. Unite a nuestro grupo de WhatsApp y ya sos parte. El proyecto ofrece Sijot completas traducidas al español, resúmenes escritos y audios explicativos de las Sijot completas, resúmenes y estilo Jabrutá. Juntos vamos a estudiar 2 Sijot semanales y cada 2 meses completamos un tomo más. Unite y sé parte.